those of you who don't know, Davos is in Switzerland. It's a town in Switzerland, and they have a big ski resort up there. And every year they get all the billionaires and CEOs and heads of state together in Davos, and they talk about what they want to do macroeconomically for the future, business-wise, right? So it ends up always being kind of a negative thing. So Davos didn't really start opening up until about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's just been kind of a negative for them ever since. But they do have media that goes there, and a lot of times it's Business Insider or Bloomberg or CNBC and all the money news, finance news people, and they tend to kind of kiss up and make them look good, right? But there were a bunch of other reporters that were listening in or who went, who were pretty critical of it. And we're going to go through some of what happened there. So first of all, I'd like to talk, we're going to do this video. So Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, are you familiar with them? They're both senators. All right, so they were both Democrat. They're still both Democratic senators, but for the first 2 years of the Biden presidency, they pretty much voted along the lines, for the most part, with the Republicans. And the reason was they didn't want, because they're both heavily invested in corporate interests. That's where they get most of their money. So like Joe Manchin, most of his money comes from the fact that he owns interest in oil in West Virginia, where he's from. And he's a fairly corrupt guy, from what we know about him. But, that's where his interest is. Kristen Sinema is from Arizona, and she ran on more of a independent, sort of progressive platform, and then kind of flipped what she won. So she voted against things she said she'd vote for. She was the swing vote that stopped the federal minimum wage from being raised to $15 an hour. She was the swing vote that stopped that. There was also a swing vote on, and she's going to talk about, I have a clip of her talking in Davos with Joe Manchin. I wonder why those two got invited, because they're kind of an odd pair to get invited to Davos. But they're going to talk about, they wanted to keep the filibuster, which is what stopped a lot of legislation going through. Because on a filibuster, you don't just need 51 votes, you need 60 votes to even get it on the floor, right? Well, that means you only need 41 votes, right, to prevent anything from getting on the floor. Well, if you take the 21 least populated states in the United States, they have 42 votes. And they only represent 11% of the population. So it's really, they want minority rule is what they're allowing to happen. And part of why they were so avid on the filibuster was, especially Kristen Sinema, was she wanted to shoot down the Voting Rights Act to expand voting, especially for minorities. So here she is bragging about doing that at Davos and how wonderful it was to prevent black people from voting.
So I think that this is an opportunity for us as a country to look back and say, is this...
Wait a second. I'm sorry, I got to pause. What the fuck is she wearing?
It looks like carpeting.
It
looks like, okay, for carpeting is kind of cool. I mean, it looks like that sort of old 70s
shag.
Sort of turn on my lava lamp sort of carpeting, but I feel weird about it as a shirt.
Oh man, Cruella DeVille,
I don't know fashion, so
she must
I don't know.
She must have,
fashion. Tell me in the comments.
She must have skinned a sheepdog for this one. Jesus, God, that's horrible. With those pink glasses, ugh.
Partisanship serving us? I would posit to you that it's not. And so while some would say that there were reluctant folks working in Congress in the last 2 years, I would actually say that that was the basis for the productivity for some incredible achievements that made a difference for the American people in the last 2 years.
We still don't agree on getting rid of the filibuster.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you just watched two of your least favorite people in the Senate give each other high fives over their legislative filibuster, over maintaining the legislative filibuster, which makes it nearly impossible to pass legislation that would materially
So that's Anna Kasparian. We steal from her a lot because she's pretty good. But that was kind of they're high-fiving over keeping the filibuster, and one of the main reasons they did it was to stop the Voting Rights Act, let alone a lot of other legislation. Like, for example, the child tax credit that was so popular during COVID that helped out millions of families out of poverty. They're part of why that's not there anymore.
Stellar.
Yeah, and they're both polling, in like the low 20s and the high teens right now in their own states. So, I mean, neither one of them is going to get reelected. It doesn't look like. They're really disliked, but it doesn't matter because they're in tune with corporate interests. That's where they get their money, and so they're going to have $1 million a year jobs after they lose their next elections anyway. So it's just a negative of the corruption of the system. But that's who gets invited to Davos to speak, just to sort of give you a taste of what we're going to get into here, right?